Hello. Thanks for watching another Sunday case study. I am Pisces Palmist, the Palmistry YouTube reader, reading the hands of celebrities every Sunday. I'm trying to determine all I can from the hands alone. And I say that because I know very, very little about the people that I read the hands of. I've never met them. And at least I try to read the hands of people I don't know anything about. This person was suggested to me by one of my subscribers. Thank you, by the way. You know who you are, and they emailed me this, still taken from a video from YouTube. You can have a look at this video. It's called The Secret Behind Ganesha's Superhuman Intelligence by Sadhguru. And it's a great image because I can see there's a lot of clarity in this image. So I'll be looking at this, but before I do that, I want to look at the shape of the hands and the fingers. This is chirognomy. It's good to look at this before looking at the more complex palmar information. And this way we get a clearer idea, a clearer understanding when concluding. And initially, it's always good to look at what stands out. This requires investigation. There's a reason for it standing out. It's a clue. And as palmists, we are detectives, and we're kind of looking at a crime scene. All the things that stand out, those potential clues, they are pins in the corkboard. And later on, we're going to tie red string, uh, to those and conclude, at least come to some conclusions. Now, these are the images I've got, and in this image here, it's the same as this one, but I've taken his left hand here. This is his left, this is his right, and I've just swapped them around. So, for argument's sake, it's just easier to look at the right image here as the right hand. Now, the immediate thing that really stands out to me is that he's got a widened basal phalanx of Jupiter. And the Jupiter finger itself, when we compare this, when we look at the other images here, you can see that it's on the cusp of being a short Jupiter finger. It's level with Saturn, and it doesn't quite reach, it just about reaches, maybe, the halfway of the Saturn's tip. So this is how we know he's on the cusp of having a short Jupiter finger. Now, these two things in conjunction with each other, a widened basal phalanx, the third phalanx here of Jupiter, as well as it being just about short, it's significantly wide. The third phalanx of Jupiter is all about our physical Jupiterian qualities: control, domination, authority. It shows in relation to the body how we control and satiate our baser desires, our needs on a physical level. And this is the left hand, so this is very internal. So this shows his wants, his needs, insecurities, and desires on a very inherent level, and they are all very physical. It's food, it's sex, it's chocolate, it's alcohol, it's womanizing. It is the pursuit in gratifying those very physical needs. Now, being that this is on the left hand, this is inherent, this is what's within, it shows how, in some way, he feels this is actually kind of screaming out in a way. He has a real a strength of desire here. And, when I look at this, I kind of immediately am drawn to what do we see in the Venus mount. The Venus mounts are certainly full, and you can see that it is raised, it's well developed, it's not overly large, and this is a signifier of someone who has quite actually a reduced social network, so they're quite sort of private. This is also backed up by this little finger here, the Mercury finger. I'll just move my head out of the way. You can see it's kind of on an angle here. It's veering away from the rest of the fingers. This is someone who requires boundaries in the way in which they express themselves. This is the left hand, so this is, again, it's quite internal. This is actually essentially just sort of who he is. The right hand does a similar thing as well. So both indoors and outdoors, if you like, internally and externally, this is someone who really requires privacy, freedom in isolation in order to express themselves. And that expression, that communicative quality and trait, that psychological pillar of his personality, is something that he requires privacy in order to complete. So when we, add these things up, this reduced social network is quite a private person. He needs, really requires those boundaries in order to truly express his uh, needs, desires. The desires are full here. essentially, these are some of the ingredients for someone who could be tempted towards, um, overly gratifying the worldly desires, the material and the physical, the bodily needs and desires. And now, where we would look for more evidence of this in the chirology, in the lines in the hands, is the headline and what this is doing, where this is heading. And if you look at this, is significantly, um, you know, drooping down into Luna. Now, this is not necessarily a bad thing, but when you look at this with the other circumstantial evidence, together it forms an image of unhealthy thinking. On its own, it would really show someone who is thinking fantastical thoughts, is highly creative. This is someone who is highly imaginative, in tune with the abstract. So this is not necessarily a bad thing. But when we combine it with things I've already mentioned, this is potentially dark thoughts, fantasy, unrealistic thinking, and reaching um, the mind is living in a place that is not grounded, essentially. So there's always a pro and a con, but when we look at clues that point us in a direction that is potentially um, dark thoughts, fantasy. This is a dark road we're looking at here, and it's the left and the right hand. So this is not just an internal thing. This is someone who is potentially, they're not just thinking, these unrealistic, abstract, highly imaginative thoughts. They are projecting them out and carrying out, completing them on quite an external way. They're influencing others with these thoughts and ideas. And again, this is not necessarily a bad thing. We should never really be judged by what we see in the hands, but our actions. The hands do provide us with a clarity of potential, especially with the more detail, the more clarity we have, the greater clarity we have, the greater, uh, the more accurate conclusion we can come to in terms of a person's character and the potential for their actions. And I have to say, what I find really interesting about his hands is the fate line, and it's the lacking of it until the age of 35. Now, there's a significant ambition line at 24. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself because I have more to say about the chirognomy. Because when I look at his hands here, I mean, what I want to see from a spiritual practitioner, a guru, a teacher of that a lot of people look up to, there's there's great power, with great responsibility, and so it's 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 important that a person has a well-developed psychological framework. Now, the four fingers of the hand are the four pillars of personality: communication, expression, talents, abilities, skills. The Apollo, the ring finger, is all about how much we can give, and our thoughts about how we provide to the world around us. Saturn is all about our feelings of morality, duty, ethics, and our societal contribution, community, security, wealth. And Jupiter is all of the things I mentioned before: domination, authority, judgment, decision making. Now, in some respect, the fact that he has a short, or just on the cusp of a short Jupiter finger, is a good thing, because it means that he understands that he is a very small cog in the universe, that he doesn't have an overinflated opinion of himself, but the ego itself is a little squashed, is a little damaged, and so there's compensatory needs, which is why we have a widened basal phalanx. And it's this compensation that is something of a worry. It's not necessarily bad that he has a reduced ego. It's a good thing in many respects, but how he manages this, how he reacts to his own feelings about himself, is a potential worry. The fact that the fingers aren't all straight and aligned is it's not necessarily um, there's no one worrying aspect about any of the finger leanings in terms of his psychology. It's just that they're not all in as much alignment as I would hope to see from someone who has um, such authority, someone who has so many people looking up to him, someone who is such a leader and guider and guide in spiritual practices. I'd hope to see a greater, healthier psychological framework. I have to say, this is something of an analytical, sensual hand mix. And sensual hands are somewhat in danger of succumbing to their own worldly desires, their own baser needs. But they are highly charismatic. They know people. They know how to um, get the best out of others around them. They are they have superb personalities. That's a real strength of charisma, and they often work in the entertainment industries because they just know um, how what people want and what makes them tick, so they can kind of look to, I suppose, not manipulate or exploit, but get the best out of situations and people in them. If he wasn't as philosophical, he probably would have ended up making a really good band manager. So I'm just going to touch on the finger leanings a little bit before I move on. Apollo leans towards Saturn only just. Jupiter seems to be doing its own thing. Um, the thumb looks actually very healthy. This is a really good sign in terms of his personality and his temperament. Um, there, there's there's not it's not as low set as I'd like to see. It's not high set, but the angle of it shows me there is something of um, again thinking of the self rather than others. It shows a lack of openness, a lack of not a lack, but not as much of a generous and open nature as I'd like to see. And that is also backed up by the space between the head and the heart line. There's not enough of a space there. He's unavailable in many respects. The interesting thing is, though, however, to negate this somewhat, absolutely, the heart line is very low set. And so this shows a greater capacity for feeling. This is someone who has a real need to love and be loved. So that's good and bad in some ways, because certainly there's an element of a huge amount of capacity for compassion and empathy. But then there's also that need to be loved as well. So that's that need for adoration, which is why we have a long Apollo finger, and that need for love on a physical level as well, which again may well tie in with those baser needs. And I think that's my overall problem here with this hand, as from what I see on in terms of chirognomy and being a spiritual leader, a guru of some sort, a teacher, where lots of people are looking up to this person and relying on them to lead by example and do the right thing. It's extremely important to lay down those boundaries and do right by your pupils, your students, really, because they will hang on to your every word. And and in an environment where he is in this kind of school, a center for yoga, it's going to be very physical. There's going to be a lot of opportunities there potentially for someone in his position to take advantage. Um, and that's what I'd like to see a greater strength of alignment from the development of his own psychology. I suppose for me, what really kind of I mean, I don't want to say icing on the cake because I'm not concluded yet. But the one telling sign here is the headline and how much it droops down into Luna, the place of high fantasy and imagination. It's also a sign of depression as well, and this comes along. This is actually um, It makes a lot of sense. As I say, he understands his place in the world. He understands that he is but a speck of dust in, the cosmos. And this is because of great awareness. He's highly intelligent. He is highly philosophical. Depression is just something that comes with great awareness and managing your own feelings about the self. And again, this comes back to this. This is a compensatory um, mechanism, coping mechanism that he has, and it's not as strong on the right hand. So that's a positive sign. That's a really positive sign because it means that he's not acting on his feelings, on his insecurities and desires as much as he could. So that's a good sign. Look at the thumb here and just how kind of bending it is here. Now, I mean, I've read and heard mixed, contradictory information from different palmists on a flexible, um, the tip of the thumb here, and some say this is a floppy mind, as in his his willpower's not strong in that he could potentially succumb to his own desires quite easily, or he could be swayed by others, persuaded even. And others might say that this is, a sign of adaptability in terms of his his drive and his character, his personality. Some might say this is a really good sign because it shows essentially it's diplomacy. He's able to see things and change and respond and adapt in a way that allows him to see another's point of view and take it on board. And also, there's potential here for someone who doesn't have a great strength of vitality. This isn't someone who is um, going to work, 12, 14-hour days. He's probably taking a lot of breaks. This isn't someone who he's not a hard worker. And this is kind of a classic sign of something of a sensual hand mix. The fingers, when they lean over to the thumb like this, it really is a sign of someone who is, and this is a kind of a natural gesture, finger leaning. Um, Obviously, he's not doing it here, but it's always a sign of someone who has a great feeling about how they want to make great changes in the world and impact and influence on others. It's not just um, someone who wants to, you know, write a book. This is someone who has real ideas about making big changes. They've got big plans and they want to act on them. Now, the fate line here that rises from the headline, this is interesting to me because it's almost as though he didn't know his path. He felt like he lacked a path. We're looking at the left hand here. So internally, there were feelings, there were insecurities about what he should be doing with his life up until the age of 35. And it's from this time that things really kicked off for him. At least that's the impression I'm getting here. Obviously, I don't have immense clarity looking at this image, but this is quite significant in that, I think we would see more if there were more. I think we're seeing something of a fate line here. But even if this is one, it's not nearly as strong. After 35, this is where his life really takes off. This is where he gets a great sense of feeling about what he should be doing with his life. And then look at the fate line here. From 53, there is a significant amount of effort here and feeling around his destiny and his purpose. There is significant wealth here at this time as well. And this seems to wane somewhat about 7 years later. So actually, where he is in his life around, there's a fair few years here where money's not looking as good. I mean, when we look at the sun line here alongside this, we can also see the sun line kind of stops as well. Similarly around at this time where this patch here, it's like he's lost his purpose. It's like he's worried about his career. It's like he's putting all this effort in, and there isn't that satisfaction coming back from what he's doing. So this might be telling as to these allegations that were made and his own feelings and fears around his career at this time, because this is So 64 up to this is 64 right up to where are we? 70. 64 to 70. So 70 onwards, so where we in 3 years' time onwards, this is my I'm already starting to predict here. Things are really going to start to look up for him. At least these are his feelings, because again, we're looking at the right hand. Now, when we look, sorry, we were looking at the left hand, so that's all very internal. Those are his thoughts, feelings, insecurities, desires, aspirations. Now, looking at the right hand, this is much more practical, external, material, environmental. This is the reality. The left hand shows his thoughts about his future now. This is what is actually going to happen. At least the hands are showing a view down the road. If you continue doing what you're doing right now in the present, this is what will happen. This is essentially what our hands tell us. Now, we can see that he is making money at this time. He's not as happy at this time. So this for the next 3 years, he's not going to be as happy in his position. Whilst he's still making money, whilst he is still working hard, and he's still got his status, there's a blow to his reputation and his feelings around he feels as though this is what we've just gathered from that left hand. He feels as though his destiny and his career has been impacted. It's been jarred. Um, and as well as that, notice how there's an island here that's developed from 54, something like that, right up until that kind of 7 year period. This is a stain on this is something of a character assassination, allegations made against him that have, affected, not ruined, but damaged his career. And after a time, you notice how the career line picks up again in strength, particularly from, as I mentioned, 3 years' time onwards. Things are really going to start to look up for him. And that he already feels as though things are going to die down, and they will. So that's really positive. So there are a mixture of really good and bad things I see in his hand here. There are essentially there's great potential for him to become sidetracked by his own physical needs. His feelings about himself create a coping mechanism which he can sometimes fall into a pattern of satiating those baser needs. Otherwise, he's significantly healthy, and there's a real clarity of body and mind, which I can only put down to yoga, as well as, I mean, maybe I think he's got a good diet as well. There's again, I've not got massive amounts of clarity here, but it doesn't look to me as though I can see any kind of major. Let's move my face out of the way. Major health issues. Looks to me he's actually got two incomes. And I can see at the age of 24 or so, there was a tremendous ambition here. And it's as though, from this time onwards, he became, um, there's so much more mental activity from this time. And this ambition here, what I'd like to see is this rise up onto the Jupiter finger itself as a straight line. And that's quite rare. I mean, that wouldn't necessarily have to happen for, the meaning that I'm about to explain. But if a line here was, coming down or however you want to interpret, from the Jupiter mount itself, right up onto the second phalanx of Jupiter, um, that would really show honorable deeds, and, achievement and success and distinction through being a noble and honorable person. And that is essentially would be a really nice thing to see, because in certain respects I see great amounts of love and compassion. I'd like to see the heartline reach right over onto the Jupiter mount itself. And I don't quite see that. It sort of stops underneath Saturn. And this again, it shows something of a selfish nature. This is very materialistic hands. They're very earthy. they're very drawn to the material and the worldly. So there's a bit of push and pull because whilst on the one hand there's a great deal of analysis and philosophy, he's highly analytical, and you see this in the knots in the fingers themselves. They're very knotty. It really is showing this. This is someone who really breaks down and processes things, really thinks about everything. This is a highly sort of philosophical person, but there's this there's this attachment to the worldly, all things worldly. So this kind of duality creates, I suppose, his real struggle is within, and if he could manage to um, manage his own feelings, if he could manage his desires around, um, the worldly needs, those baser desires, those physical and bodily needs, the material needs. If he could pull himself away from that, break away from that, I think he would actually be a happier and more aligned individual and become more able as well to give back. Um, the lines between teachers and healers are often blurred because we are, I suppose, providing in some way. Knowledge is power, and with knowledge, we enable and empower others, and that is an essentially healing in itself. So the lines are blurred there, and I think that he would be much more equipped and able to to step into that teacher slash healer role in a way that perhaps he is his real purpose. Now, I'm looking at his hand here, and I can see it. This is remarkable here because it's almost like at first I thought, well, is this a partial fate line that joins the headline, or that just stops? No, I think this is a sun line. So I'm wondering if this is very, very unusual to see a sun line this low down on the hand, this strong on the hand, and it's almost equally as unlikely to see it stop altogether, only to begin much later on in life. It's so odd. It's almost as though he came from. Um, I don't think it's right to say that this person came from money, but it's almost like he's a child prodigy that lost his path and refound it again. And I do think actually part of the reason for these dramatically drooping headlines is as a result of, these allegations. Um, I think it has caused depression. You can see a health line here, and it's cutting right through it. And after this, you can see the headline kind of fades out. It becomes blurry, murky, and it's not well developed after. It's had a direct effect on his physical and mental health. So let me know what your thoughts and feelings are on this palm reading. Let me know what you know about Sadhguru, and yeah, let me know if you've seen anything there that I didn't potentially pick up on, and your thoughts as well. And also, please do send me an email or drop a comment below as to who you'd like me to read the hands of for next Sunday's case study. Thank you so much for watching, and please do subscribe. I'll see you on the next one.